England is one of the world's oldest nations. Among its many founding peoples, the most historically prominent were the Anglo-Saxons, who were collectively referred to as the English people. Yet, for most of their recorded history, the Anglo-Saxons were not unified under an English kingdom, but rather divided into many smaller states. It was only after the invasions of the Vikings that the dream of a united England became a reality. During the 9th century, the Vikings brought down almost all of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, leaving Wessex as the leader of the English resistance. Winning battles against the Vikings and forming alliances with other English leaders, Wessex gradually expanded its kingdom northwards. By 927, after conquering York, Æthelstan of Wessex would claim rulership over all the English. In this video, we will chronicle that century-long story. Welcome to our overview of how the Saxons weathered the Danish conquests and how the underdog House of Wessex forged a war-torn and politically divided land into the Kingdom of England.
Do you know why thousands of people on YouTube and Patreon support us financially? Because they get history you won't find anywhere else. We release 3 new exclusive videos every week. Plus, they get perks like early access to all videos, voting rights on upcoming series and videos, access to our private Discord, our production schedule, and much more. Right now, 250 exclusive episodes are waiting for members and patrons, including from our series on the Eastern Front of World War II, Spanish War of Succession, the Punic Wars, the Pacific War, the Iberian Reconquista, the Russian Revolution and Civil War, the North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, Sicilian Wars between the Greeks and Carthaginians, and many others. By joining, you're not only unlocking rare content, you're also supporting the stories you love. Your help allows us to keep producing 3 free videos per week while paying our team competitive salaries and growing the channel. Join via the links in the description, the pinned comment, or by pressing the join button under the video. Thanks for making this possible.
The Roman withdrawal from Britain in the early 5th century left a vast power vacuum, which was filled by the migration and settlement of various Germanic peoples from northern Europe. Chief amongst these groups were the Angles and the Saxons, pagan peoples who eventually Christianized and forged several kingdoms on the British Isles, such as East Anglia, Essex, Kent, Mercia, Northumbria, Sussex, and Wessex. The Angles and Saxons shared a common language, ethnic heritage, and religion. However, each kingdom had its own unique foundation myth, customs, and laws. Their kings spent much of their time at war with one another, competing for land, resources, and prestige. By the late 8th century, however, the Anglo-Saxons were threatened by new invaders from the north. Throughout the 8th century, the northern lands of Scandinavia faced several significant challenges, including overpopulation, a shortage of farmland, and aggression from the Frankish Empire. These issues prompted young men, adventurers, traders, and pirates to seek opportunities for wealth abroad. A small group of Scandinavian pirates, or Vikings, first arrived in England in 789. Landing at Portland in the Kingdom of Wessex, they killed a local official. The event seemed of little significance, but it was the precursor to the violence that would follow. More outrageous was the attack on the monastery of Lindisfarne 5 years later. Lindisfarne was one of the holiest sites in the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Its destruction sent shockwaves throughout Western Europe. After Lindisfarne, the Vikings continued to raid along the English coast, targeting wealthy monasteries and trading towns. Norse advances in ship technology allowed for quick hit-and-run tactics, which often left the English unable to defend targets of Viking raids. Around the middle of the 9th century, the great towns of the south, Canterbury, London, and Winchester, were all raided. Such successes grew the size of the Northmen's fleets and the ambitions of their leaders. In 865, a huge fleet gathered in the North Sea, known as the Great Heathen Army. Attracting followers from Scandinavia and other Viking bases in Ireland, Frisia, and Francia, it consisted of up to perhaps 5,000 warriors. Previous Viking raiders had been content with plunder and loot, But the leaders of this army, Ivar, Ubbe, and Halfdan, were determined to conquer the whole of England. In 866, the Vikings captured York, the capital of Northumbria, and in the following year, the Northumbrian kings, Osbert and Alle, died in their attempt to retake the town. In 869, the invaders marched into East Anglia. Its ruler, King Edmund, was defeated and slain in battle. His kingdom was now subjected to Viking rule. Ivar then left the Great Army to fight the Britons of Alt Clut. Halfdan was left in charge, and he moved the army to London, where they spent the winter of 870. At the beginning of 871, he crossed into Wessex, capturing Reading. This initiated several months of warfare with King Æthelflæd of Wessex. Yet, in April, Æthelred died, possibly from battle wounds. The throne was passed to the king's brother, Alfred, who decided to pay the Vikings to leave Wessex. Mercia was the Great Army's next target. In 874, they sailed down the River Trent and captured Repton, the burial site of several Mercian kings. Seeing the fate of Edmund and the Northumbrian kings, King Burhs of Mercia fled, abdicating the throne and finding refuge in Rome. The Mercian kingdom was now divided into two parts. The Vikings settled its eastern half, and the rest was entrusted to Ceolwulf II, a Mercian prince under Danish overlordship. Wessex now stood as the last truly independent Anglo-Saxon kingdom. The Viking army now broke up again, as Halfdan went north to rule over York. In his place, another warlord, Guthrum, became the leader of the southern forces located at Cambridge. In 876, Guthrum led a second invasion of Wessex, taking Wareham on the southern coast. The following year, he moved west to Exeter. Here, he planned to rendezvous with an allied fleet sailing from the east. However, the ships were destroyed by a storm off the coast of Dorset. Guthrum was now forced to offer peace with Wessex. He retreated north of the West Saxon border to Gloucester. At the end of the year, King Alfred retired to Chippenham for Christmas. Here, he would celebrate the festivities with his nobles, servants, and family. For the Anglo-Saxons, Christmas celebrations continued into early January. During the celebrations, Guthrum broke his oath of peace and marched south. Under the cover of night, he captured Chippenham. In the chaos, Alfred somehow managed to escape, but without an army to support him, he fled westward, finding refuge in the Somerset marshes. The nobles of Wessex were now divided and leaderless. Some had been killed or captured at Chippenham, while others submitted or fled abroad. Most returned to their estates, hoping to be left alone by Guthrum. To the west, the Viking leader Ubbe landed his fleet on the northern coast of Devon. He and Guthrum sought to trap Alfred between their armies. Yet, Ealdorman Odda of Devon had remained loyal to Alfred, fighting the invaders near Countisbury. Here, Ubbe was slain and his army forced back to the sea. Encouraged by the victory, Alfred marched out of the marshes with support from the local nobles. He sent messengers to Somerset, Wiltshire, and Hampshire, demanding that every man capable of fighting take up arms in his name. Several thousand West Saxons answered the call. They gathered on the border of Somerset and Wiltshire at Ecgbert's Stone, and Alfred was welcomed to great acclaim. Together, they marched east to face Guthrum. On a fateful day in early May, 878, the two armies caught sight of one another near the royal estate of Edington in Wiltshire. Both sides marched to what would become one of the most decisive clashes in English history. Alfred ordered his army to form a shield wall, a long line of shields locked together. As the two sides drew closer, they exchanged throwing spears and arrows and shouted their war chants. The Vikings hurled themselves onto the West Saxon shield wall, their axes hacking and their spears jabbing at the formidable blockade of wood and steel. Alfred fought bravely in the middle of the action, as expected of a king. Late in the day, the discipline of the West Saxon shield wall won out, and the Viking army slowly began to crumble. Sensing the coming doom, Guthrum called a full retreat. His base at Chippenham was 15 miles north. As his army rushed back, they were chased by Alfred's troops. and in great numbers they were cut down from behind. Guthrum had suffered significant losses to his army. Chippenham was now under siege and running out of food. With no options left, he surrendered to Alfred. The victorious King of Wessex offered peace, but only if Guthrum converted to Christianity. The Danish warlord accepted. He was baptized at Aller, Somerset, with Alfred standing as godfather. As Christian brothers, the two leaders negotiated a peace treaty. Guthrum then left Wessex. He would return east to rule as King of East Anglia. Alfred had won a great victory, and now had the power to reform his kingdom into a defensive stronghold. To that end, he replaced disloyal ealdormen with followers who stayed loyal during Guthrum's invasion, and ordered the construction of about 30 fortresses, or burhs, throughout the kingdom to guard against future attacks. These were protected by ramparts, ditches, and garrisoned by the followers of local landowners. Moreover, a fleet was built to combat small groups of Vikings. Finally, ad hoc military levies were transformed into standing armies on horseback, allowing for quicker responses to invasions. Alfred also began to expand his authority beyond Wessex's borders. After Edington, King Ceolwulf of Mercia fell from power. In his place rose one King Æthelflæd, a ruler surrounded by hostile powers. These included the Welsh, the Vikings of York, and those in the East Midlands. To protect his kingdom, Æthelflæd negotiated an alliance with Wessex in 883, acknowledging Alfred as his overlord. In recognition of his junior status, Æthelflæd styled himself Lord of the Mercians rather than King, while Alfred took the grand title King of the Anglo-Saxons. The two leaders went further to strengthen dynastic bonds between Mercia and Wessex. Æthelflæd married Alfred's daughter, Æthelflæd, and after Alfred captured London in 886, he gifted the town to his new son-in-law. Alfred's military reforms and support from Mercia helped him defeat future Viking attacks in the second half of his reign. By the time he died in 889, Wessex had become a strong kingdom, well prepared to take on any opponent, and he had truly earned the epithet the Great. Alfred was succeeded by his son, Edward. To re-establish dynastic ties between Mercia and Wessex, Edward sent his eldest son, Æthelstan, to be brought up at the Mercian court. Here, he would be fostered by Edward's sister, Æthelflæd, and her husband, Æthelred. Edward spent the first few years of his reign fighting to secure his throne. His cousin, Prince Æthelwold, had claimed Wessex for himself and was supported by the Vikings of East Anglia and York. Although Æthelwold died fighting Edward's army in 902, this war continued until peace was negotiated with the Vikings in 906 at Tiddingford. The conflict was reignited in 909, when Edward sent an army of Mercians and West Saxons into Lincolnshire. The army's objective was to capture the remains of St. Oswald at Bardney Abbey, thereby securing the relics of a holy martyr who was a symbol of unity for the Anglo-Saxon peoples. The army successfully obtained the bones, then raided throughout Lincolnshire for 5 weeks, before returning home and burying Oswald at Gloucester. The Vikings of York responded in kind. In 910, they marched south, raiding throughout western Mercia. After a few weeks' work, they decided to turn home. But, weighted down with heavy plunder, they moved slowly. Edward and Æthelred were able to raise their armies to intercept the invaders, and the two sides met at Tettenhall. Here, the Norse army suffered huge casualties. 2 Viking kings died in the battle, and the English won another decisive victory. The following year, Lord Æthelred died. Without sons to succeed him, the Mercian throne went to his wife, Æthelflæd. Æthelflæd formed an effective partnership with her brother, King Edward, and together they would lead offensive campaigns into Viking territory. They divided military responsibilities. Edward would be responsible for fighting against the Vikings in the East Midlands, Essex, and East Anglia. Æthelflæd would be responsible for battling the Vikings in the Central and North Midlands. She would also guard against raids from across the Irish Sea. In preparation for this upcoming campaign, the Mercian towns of London and Oxford were ceded to Edward. From 912 to 915, Æthelflæd constructed several fortifications on her borders, building strongholds at Warwick, Tamworth, Stafford, Runcorn, and Edisbury. Meanwhile, Edward made several small advances. He marched into Essex, where he built a burh at Witham to consolidate his hold over the region. He also built border burhs at Hertford and Buckingham, and captured Bedford. These burhs had been used as a defense against the Vikings by Alfred, but his children used them both for defense and as tools of aggression. They would become launch pads for invasions into the Danelaw. Then, they were built to consolidate control of conquered lands. The key year in the war came in 917. The Vikings were attacked on two fronts, by Edward from the south and by Æthelflæd from the west. At a bloody battle in the summer of 917, Æthelflæd lost several of her commanders at Derby, but nevertheless was able to win control of this key Danish stronghold. Meanwhile, in the east, Edward's border fortresses defeated several Viking assaults. In late summer, he attacked Tempsford. During the siege, the King of East Anglia and several of his earls died before the town fell to Edward. In the autumn, Edward's army seized Colchester, Northampton, and Huntingdon. Fortifications were constructed at Colchester and Huntingdon in preparation for a second offensive. Yet, the remaining leaders of the region knew their resistance was futile. Before the end of the year, the Vikings of East Anglia and the Viking army at Cambridge surrendered to him. This marked an end to almost 50 years of Norse rule over the kingdom of East Anglia. The siblings continued their advance into the following year, pushing further into the East Midlands. In late spring, Edward marched northeast, taking the Viking fortress of Stamford. At the same time, Æthelflæd took control of Leicester. Yet, in this moment of victory, tragedy struck when Æthelflæd died in summer of 918. She was succeeded by her daughter, Ælfwine, as the next lady of the Mercians. Edward appeared content with this succession, at least initially. In the meantime, he was busy fighting in the northeast Midlands and capturing Nottingham, thereby pressuring the remaining Viking leaders in the Midlands to submit to Edward. The Kingdom of Northumbria was now the last Viking realm in England. In December 918, Edward turned back west, capturing Tamworth from the Mercians and deposing his niece. It is possible that Edward only intended for Ælfwine to rule temporarily, until he completed the conquest of Danish Mercia. Alternatively, it is also possible that she had already proved an incapable ruler and had lost support from the Mercians. Ælfwine was sent into exile at a West Saxon nunnery, and Mercia was now fully integrated, with Wessex under Edward's rule. Around the same time, the Viking leader Ragnar seized York. He was the leader of a Norse-Irish dynasty descending from Ivar, who had led the Great Heathen Army. Ragnar had already defeated the rulers of Bamburgh and Scotland in battle, and now posed a renewed threat to Edward. In response, the English king reinforced his northern border to guard against Ragnar and his Irish sea allies. He built burhs at Nottingham, Bakewell, Manchester, and Telwall. He also worked closely with Christian rulers from Bamburgh, Strathclyde, and Scotland to pressure Ragnar into a peace treaty. Eventually, he agreed. At Bakewell in 920, Ragnar signed a treaty with Edward and his northern neighbours. However, Ragnar died the following year. He was succeeded by his brother, King Sitric, who maintained peace with Edward for the next few years. Despite Edward's success both in peace and warfare, some in Mercia were unhappy with his reign. These dissidents were inspired by separatist motives. They did not want a West Saxon to rule over them, and were perhaps also disenchanted with Edward's treatment of Ælfwine. The separatists gathered in the summer of 924 at Chester to revolt against the king. As an experienced warlord, the king crushed the rebels with ease. However, he was fatally wounded during the campaign and died shortly afterwards. With the sudden death of King Edward, the question of his succession was left uncertain. The Mercians favoured Edward's eldest son, Æthelstan, who had grown up in the Midlands, while the West Saxon lords preferred his second son, Alfred, who had spent his youth in Wessex. For a few weeks, there would be a standoff between the brothers. In August of 924, Ælflæd travelled north for diplomatic talks with Æthelstan. However, he died at Oxford during the journey. This left the path open for Æthelstan to unite the two realms. Æthelstan was born a West Saxon, but had been brought up as a Mercian. Therefore, he could present himself as a prince of both kingdoms. He was crowned the following year at Kingston-upon-Thames. Located on the border between Mercia and Wessex, this was a great show of unity. Æthelstan's first major action was to reaffirm peace with Northumbria. In 926, he arranged for the marriage of his sister, Edith, to King Sitric. As part of this agreement, Sitric also converted to Christianity. Unfortunately, like his brother, Sitric died a year after making peace with the English. At York, Sitric's supporters summoned his kinsman, Guthrum, King of Dublin, to take up the throne. Meanwhile, on York's southern border, Æthelstan's army was already marching. Before Guthrum could arrive, Æthelstan conquered the town, naming himself its master. He then moved further north. At Penrith in Cumbria, he summoned a meeting of the northern and Welsh rulers. All present acknowledged Æthelstan's expansion into northern England and agreed to submit to him as overlord. Appealing to their common Christian faith, Æthelstan also ordered his new vassals to swear never to form alliances with the Vikings. For the first time in history, England had been unified under the control of a single king. This had been the combined work of several generations. Alfred's victory at Edington secured Wessex, and his military reforms strengthened it. The marriage of Æthelred and Æthelflæd brought the Mercians and the West Saxons together. Edward's conquest of eastern England greatly expanded English power, and finally, Æthelstan's invasion of the north unified the English peoples and established supremacy over Britain. However, they would face future challenges. Several of the rulers present at Penrith would not keep their oaths. The Scots would not long be content as English vassals, and the Viking rulers of Dublin would also soon return to York. Conflict over Northumbria would continue for another generation, but Æthelstan and his successors would continue to fight to keep the English united under one king. By the 950s, the Dublin Viking threat to the north was firmly defeated. The West Saxon rulers could now be secure in their status as kings of England, at least for a couple more generations, before the coming of Canute the Great and a second period of Viking conquest. More videos on the history of medieval England are on the way, so make sure you're subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing. It helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 200 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video. To watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.